Thousands of people will be getting a pink slip from the Department of Defense. They're getting fired. And this is coming from a recent visit that Doge had just about 7 or 8 days ago at the DoD. How is it happening? Why is it happening? We're going to look at all the drama using data. Now let's get into it. Okay, so yesterday was Friday. The Pentagon drops a bombshell. They're planning to fire between 5 and 8% of their civilian workforce. That's right, the people who keep the military machine humming behind the scenes, they're going to get the axe. Now, the Pentagon's got about 950,000 civilian employees. Think engineers, IT people, administrative staff, the whole crew. So 5 to 8%, that's like 46,000 to 76,000 federal employees. That's the size of a city. You're cutting a city of people from this agency. Now, it's just not them that are feeling the ramifications. You cut somebody, cut a federal employee, there's probably 3 or 4 people in their orbit, meaning their immediate family, could be their kids or their wife or friends that are feeling the impact. So the impact will be felt. It will be rippled across about 250,000 people. The first target will be over 5,000 probationary workers. Those are the new people, the people that usually have 1 or 2 years in service. They are what I like to call low-hanging fruit. It doesn't matter if their performance was outstanding. If they had amazing performance, it doesn't matter. They have the status of probationary worker, so they're probably going to get cut, especially if they don't fit within this box called mission critical. If they're deemed non-mission critical, then it's going to be a snap of a finger. It's going to be an easy decision for them to make. Now, with probation, usually after probation is when a federal employee will have their full civil service protections. So what does that mean? That means that they actually have due process. They're informed. You have to inform them at least 30 days. And if it's a RIF, it's 60 days. Not just that, they have the right to respond. And they have the right to appeal to the MSPB board. So those rights come after probationary time. Now, in the DoD, if you look at the Cyber Acceptance Service, that's a 3-year probationary period. But the thing with this situation is there's actually 55,000 probationary workers within the DoD. This 5,000 number, that's a small sliver. The bigger number, the 55,000, that's the actual goal. That's what they want to achieve. But earlier that same Friday, there was a report saying, hold up, let's take a pause. Apparently, the Defense Department was about to fire a whole bunch more people, over 50,000, but then they stopped. They slammed the brakes. Why? Because the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, and some Pentagon lawyers, they decided, wait, let's check to see if this is even legal. There's a U.S. code they have to consider, Title 10, Section 129A. It's like a rule book for the Pentagon, and it says you can't just start chopping at the federal workforce. You can't just start firing civilian workers unless you've analyzed how it will impact military readiness and lethality. So that whole due diligence period where they have to analyze that, it needs to be done. It is not optional. And one of the senior officials from DoD said, we didn't do it. We haven't done it yet. We need more time to do it. The military's been scrambling all week, probably into the weekend, making a list, trying to figure out cybersecurity specialists. Okay, they're mission critical. What about intel analysts? Are they? Yeah, they're critical. What about the guy who makes PowerPoint slides at the cubicle downstairs? Is he? No, he's not critical. Let's go ahead and get rid of him. So they're making the list, and they're saying that it's to the benefit of taxpayers that they're doing their due diligence to look for redundancies. But they're actually buying time to do the analysis that is legally required. But check this out. Pete Hegseth specifically said they're going after poor performing employees first. And sure, they might start there. That's a whole lot better than what other federal agencies were doing. But if you're trying to get this type of number in the tens of thousands, you're just not going to target poor performers. There will be solid performers that get into this bunch. And like I said earlier, it's going to be based on their title of probationary status. Now, DoD is the largest federal agency within this government. 36% of federal employees, they work for the DoD. It attracts veterans. You know, the number 30%, that's what's usually stated when you're talking about the veteran population within the federal government. In the DoD, it's larger than that. especially in the Department of Air Force. It's much larger. It's closer to 55%. And the DoD, they attract military spouses. The entire Pentagon civilian workforce is 950,000 people. It's close to 1 million people. So this 5,000 number, that's just a tiny percent at this point. It should grow larger. So you might make it through the first cut, let's say the first phase, and then comes the second phase, and then comes the RIF and the reorganization. How many people are going to be left standing after the final phase? When we're looking at 2026, July 2026, that is supposed to be the finish line. We have agencies right now submitting RIF plans that should be submitted by next month. What is that going to look like? I got a couple of friends over at the Pentagon right now. They know a lot of people that are on probation, that are nervous in the morning when they're checking their email, that are wondering, what is going to happen to me? Should I start planning to file unemployment if this goes south? There's no indication at this point. It's not something where people are given that much notice. It happens so quickly. And then if you're not anticipating it, if you do not have a plan B or a plan C in some cases, you're going to be at an extreme disadvantage. The secretary also said he would soon impose a department-wide hiring freeze and take more time to identify on a performance-based standard who we're going to hire. This is something pretty new because when we first heard of the federal hiring freeze on January 20th, one of the agencies that was exempt was the DoD. When I was helping this lady not too long ago, let's say a few days ago, it was last week, she had 2 interviews, one with the Department of Navy, one with the Department of Army. She was preparing for her interviews, and at the last minute, right before the interview kicked off, they canceled it. They said, we can no longer do this interview because they don't have access to the system on their computer to actually identify individuals for onboarding. So they could no longer do the appropriate steps in order to bring her into the agency, so they canceled it. They didn't say the interview will be at a later date. They just said that it's over. Your opportunity, it's over now. So imagine for a second that you're one of these people, one of the 5,000 that's getting a termination letter this coming week. Whether you're working on policy or you're working in IT, you're getting the boot. Now, that is not what people envision when they're pursuing a federal government job. So one of the differences when you're looking at the private sector and the public sector, to get a federal government job, it is more of a time investment. Generally speaking, you're looking at 4 to 6 months. You're looking at 100 days or more, usually more, especially when you're involving clearances, when you're involving top secret clearances. There's a lot of work on the candidate before they're actually able to start their job sometimes, and this can involve a polygraph test. So you are sinking so much time into the process with the expectation of some semblance of job security or job stability. And then, as you notice the political winds change, all of that is upended. And then people tell you, well, why are you getting upset? No one's entitled to a job. Well, it's true, nobody is entitled to a job, but there is an expectation when you are applying and you receive the job offer that as long as you are meeting the performance standard, you will be retained by that agency. What's not expected is that the administration will indiscriminately fire individuals because they have probation in their status. That's not the expectation. And that's one of the reasons that people get upset or they get emotional about this topic. It's not so much that people are expecting a job. They're expected to be treated with some courtesy. They're expected to be treated with some level of respect by just being a professional human worker. And a lot of these people are veterans who have already served. Okay, so let's play around with the numbers for a bit. If they pause at 5,400 and then go full steam ahead to 76,000, that's 70,600 more cuts that are coming. That's 13 times the initial wave. And if they stick to 47,000, you still got 42,000 left to go. So no matter how you look at it, you will essentially be flipping the lives of tens of thousands of federal workers. Consider it from this perspective. The Pentagon says they're focused on poor performers. But when you look at a probationary employee, in some cases, people are getting fired with 2 to 3 months on the job. How can you accurately evaluate their performance to actually suggest that they are a poor performer? Even if they've been there 6 months, let's say. If you are new to the federal government, or if you're changing to a federal agency, let's say you work at the Department of Labor today and tomorrow you jump at the Department of Agriculture. You're switching the agency. there is a period of time where you're still getting proficient with what's going on in that agency, because every agency has different acronyms. They have a different hierarchy. They have different processes. They have different SOP. There's different ways to do things. And there's a learning curve when you get in there. Not everything is always documented. You don't hit the ground running, so to speak. You have to talk to the individuals who have worked there, and there's a lot of on-the-job training that takes place before you can build up that proficiency. So how can you just look at an individual after a few months and say, this person's a poor performer? You can't do that. And I don't understand why OPM, why are they putting in that language, poor performer? You don't have to do that. You can leave that off. You can just say, hey, listen, we're just firing people. We're trying to get the number down and, bad luck. Bad luck on your half. You're going to have to go. Bye-bye. You could just say that, right? Because in some states, if you're trying to file unemployment, they have rules about poor performance, depending on what it is. Like if it's habitual poor performance, maybe you don't get unemployment in certain states. I'm mainly looking at the southern states. I'm looking at Texas and Mississippi. You're going to have to do your own research to find out what the requirement is to actually file for unemployment. But it seems like it was just a small change that you had to make this letter more honest. Somebody asked me the other day, do you think this will happen to my agency? It's a small one. And I was like, once they went ahead and announced it for DOD, I think it's safe to assume that all agencies are going to be looked at. And this is what was said. All agencies will be looked at. There's around 400 federal agencies. So I don't think anyone is exempt from this level of analysis where they're saying, hey, this agency is too big, start making the cuts. In fact, the same thing happened recently with the IRS, and this is tax season. If you want to know more about that, check this video out next. If you need a federal resume example, check out the links down below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.